Hello, welcome to Microsoft Excel, Level 1, Video 2. In today's video, we're going to move on past the orientation that we looked at last video and move into what's usually the first step when you're building a spreadsheet, and that is designing your labels. So labels are the words that are used to describe what the data is or what the equations are. You can build a spreadsheet without labels, and I've seen a lot of those ones out there. The problem is that it then becomes a bunch of numbers and equations. So without labels, you really don't know what's going on in your spreadsheet. So the first step, as I just mentioned, is usually designing the sheet out by putting your labels in, giving it some structure as to what the purpose of the spreadsheet is and what the data that you have in there is for. So I'm going to start by zooming in a bit just so it's easier for you to see me. Don't worry if you are at a normal 100 screen, that's fine. It's just a bit easier for you to see me in the tutorial this way. So labels, as I said, are what we use to define what the data is within our spreadsheet, and they're words. So as you can see, each of our cells within here allows us not only to put in numbers, obviously, and equations, but the words. So part of the struggle and issues that we're going to have as we start out with this stage is how to get the words to fit properly. So entering a label is just clicking on the cell that you want your label in and typing it in. So let's go ahead and add our first name in. Okay, so my first name, Brad, is very short and fits easily within that cell. If I went my full first name, Bradley, that would still fit in. Now, if we were to go with my first and last name together in one cell, it would then become a problem. So let's go ahead and we're going to press the space bar and we're going to add in our last name as well. Now, I guess I should probably say that this is something that you probably should never do. When we're entering in labels and words and things, usually it's only one word per cell. In this case, if my spreadsheet was a bunch of people's names and I wanted to alphabetize it later by last name or by first name, we definitely would not want to put our whole name within one cell. We're doing this as an example just so that we could have something larger within that cell. Now, you can see our flashing I-beam cursor is just at the end there. So I'm going to go ahead and press return or your enter button on your keyboard. Go ahead and do that as well. And now my cell A1, where we typed our name in, is actually spilling over into cell B1 over here. You can see where I'm circling with my mouse. So this is a concern. And in the initial stages of setting up your spreadsheet, you're going to face this many, many times. So a variety of choices, I guess, we have as we're designing our spreadsheet out or building it from scratch like this. We could click on that word, or in this case, the two words, and I could drop the font size down. So remember up over here, we were briefly looking at these in our orientation video. Size 12 is the default on my computer. Yours might be different, and that's okay. So size 12, I could drop this font size down to something much smaller. Now, the issue there is that my full name is actually 3.5 letters too large. That is a lot. So in order to get this to actually fit in cell A1, we'd be probably dropping it down to size 6 or 8 font. That is way too small. There's no way anybody would see that. The smallest font that you should ever drop down to would be probably a size 11. Now, we used to use size 10 font. Most people now wear glasses and whatnot, so it's not that good to drop below size 10. So what are my other choices? Well, instead of changing the name to be a much smaller font size, I could adjust this font. We could maybe try a different font face. So watch as I click up here where it says Calibri. When I pop that open, there's all different types of fonts. And again, this is just the style of digital writing, so to speak. Some of them are smaller and some are larger, as you can see. That still is not going to get me anywhere near small enough to fit the whole name in. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of times maybe you just need to change the type of label. So in the case of this one, maybe I don't have my full name in here. Maybe I have just my first name, or I use a short hyphenated acronym for some other words, for example. That might be too large. In other cases, if it's just a little bit too big, then you can actually adjust the size of your cells. Now, some of these things will be practical and useful in certain ways, other times not. So what do I mean by that? Is right now cell A1, as we know, spills halfway into cell B1. So if I put my mouse, and you can do this along with me, between column A and B, so up where the letters are, between A and B, we get that mouse cursor. So vertical striped line with the horizontal arrows. Hold down your left mouse button. So hold the button down and pull to the right. And then when your whole word fits in, you can let go. And now my full name fits into one cell. The concern with doing this, though, is further below here, we have now stretched the width of column A all the way down to the bottom of the spreadsheet. So if this was a label up on the top and now I wanted to do some work down below, my column A is this much wider compared to the standard size of the rest of the spreadsheet. That may be a concern. Stuff to consider, I guess, as you're looking at this initial design. Will this impact things that you have below? So that was one way that we could adjust our cells in order to fit the data in. I'm going to go back up to the top where we were a second ago. So come along with me. We're going to put our mouse once again on the line between columns A and B. Hold your left mouse button down, and we can drag it back to the left, and I'll put it roughly to where it was before, and let go. If you're not perfect in alignment, don't worry. So besides manually, that's called holding the mouse button down and pulling to realign your column width, the other thing that you can do is, if we're looking at just one cell, but if we had multiple cells all the way down, you would enter all of the data in, and then the last step would be to come back to that line between A and B like we were a second ago. And instead of holding the mouse button down and dragging and guessing where we think it should go, we can double click. So double left click, click, click. And what happens is that Excel will automatically adjust the width of that column to best fit all of the data in, so the widest piece. When we do some examples later on, we'll practice a bit with this double click method as well. Okay, I'm gonna go back and put it back to where it was. So once again, carefully take your mouse, put it on the column between A and B, hold the left mouse button down, pull to the left, and let go when you put it back to where it was roughly. So at this point, you can pause the video and practice a little bit with this cell transition of either double clicking or manually holding the mouse button down and pulling left or right to adjust your cells. This is done regularly in Excel, so being comfortable and proficient in being able to manipulate the width of your columns is really important to know. By the way, you can also do this vertically. And what I mean by that is if I go between the numbers, so for example, if I carefully put my mouse between row 1 and row 2, we still get that same type of mouse cursor, and we can actually drag the thickness of our cells. Now this one is not done as often at all. Usually if we make the font much, much larger, it becomes too tall, for example. So there's where we would actually want a little bit of a thicker row. Usually the column widths are the ones that you adjust more often than not. So as I said, go ahead and pause the video at this point. Practice that a little bit. Again, you're looking to be comfortable with those mouse cursors that we'd mentioned before. So our main standard mouse pointer is, of course, the white cross. As I manipulate around my screen, for example, between column titles A and B, I can get a vertical black line with a left and right arrowhead. A little bit later in our video, we're going to talk about another mouse cursor that you'll see. Okay, so my last option when it comes to working with cells and labels that are too large to fit within the cell is I can do what's called merging cells. Now, this is a button that I mentioned in the first video as an important one that we were going to touch on. Merging cells, and that button, sorry, is this right here, right in the middle of our home ribbon. It's called Merge and Center. And there's a few different options with the small drop-down arrow. What does it do? Merging allows you to take multiple cells and glue them together digitally into one large cell. So watch me in the middle screen here. I'm just going to go somewhere in some white space, and using the white cross mouse pointer, hold my left mouse button down. I'm going to pull across a couple. I'm going to pull down a few. This big block of cells, I could glue together into one big cell. So we can merge as small as 2 cells, or 2 cells this way, or 4 cells, or larger. Notice it's always a rectangular square type of a shape. We can't do kind of L shapes or anything like that. It has to be in a block type of location. So the purpose of merging is sticking cells into one large cell. Now, the spreadsheet that we're working on right now, if this label, which we put our name in as a placeholder, if that label was, for example, the top of the letterhead for your small business, so Brad's Computer Store, and I would have a phone number and an email address and a website and all of this information, then it would be great. We would take a large group of cells, maybe this size, and merge that into one big cell. So I'm going to just do a quick demonstration one here. Then we're going to go over to our name that we did in the corner, and I'll show you how to use the merge there. So if I grab the size that I want, all I do is I hit the merge button, and there it is. It makes this one big block of cells. So the little lines, as you see, are all gone, and now this is all together in one. What's the point? Well, the benefit of this is that the cells now below over here have not been impacted. So remember when we first started to look at cell A1 with our name in, I said we could stretch the column width wider or make it narrower. Great option, except that it would mess up the alignment of the cells below. A merge in center, which is what we have over here, allows us to maintain the rest of the spreadsheet exactly the way it is. So once inside here, you can type away and add as much information as you want. Now, before we go ahead and do a merge in practice with some of that, things to note in this middle section over here. So when we talked about merging and centering, and we talked about bold, italics, and underline, and some of what we call formatting options, these features stay stuck to the cells. So currency percentages and all of these ones as well. Now, why is that a concern? Well, for example, here the merge. If I don't want the merge anymore and I start pressing my delete key on my keyboard, you can hear the click, nothing happens. So these are features that stay on the spreadsheet. So when I press delete, it will delete the data, like the words or the numbers or even the equations, but it will not delete the formatting. This may be a concern later on. So if you accidentally did a merge or you chose to do a merge and then decided that you don't want it anymore, there's a certain way to delete these things. Now, the common mistakes that beginning Excel users make is they'll practice like what we're going to do today. And then what they'll do is they'll just kind of highlight everything and press the delete button to erase all this stuff and then try to reuse that sheet of paper. The best way to maybe describe it in a way that would make sense to you is pull off a piece of aluminum foil off the roll, wrap up your leftovers, put it in the fridge. Later, you eat the leftovers. What do you do with that piece of aluminum foil? You can never flatten it back out and put it back on the roll. It's always crinkled. There's always left stuff on there. Same thing here. So merging and centering, which we're working on right now, you cannot press the delete key to get rid of it. It's there. It's stuck there. So any of these kind of settings, if you start practicing and playing around, and then you decide that you wish to make a good spreadsheet for something important, don't reuse the page like what we have on right now. Delete this page or this sheet, create a brand new document. Just in case there's parts of this left behind, you do not want it to cause you trouble. So the proper way to get rid of a merge that we don't want anymore is that little drop down arrow. So right here where the button is for merge and center, to the very right side, there's a small little drop down arrow. I give that a click, and at the bottom of the list is unmerge cells. Click, and you can see all the grid lines reappear, and now this is all individual cells once again. So let's put that into actual use. I'm going to go over here. I've already typed in my label, so my full name is there. It's still spilling halfway into column B. So all I do is I take my mouse, and using the white cross, I'm going to go just in the middle of my name, somewhere where I know we are in the middle of cell A1. Hold the left mouse button down, pull carefully and slide over top of column B, and let go. So now the outside edging has got a green line. That lets me know that I've selected two cells. So right now cell A1 and B1 are chosen. Do not worry about the gray and white coloring that's inside there. The deal with the gray and white coloring is more about which was the first cell that you chose in the group rather than it being highlighted or not. I know that seems a little bit counterproductive. Other programs, when we highlight, everything turns gray or blue. It doesn't quite work that way with Excel. So we're looking actually at this outside little green trim edge all the way around. Now, I was only having to select two cells, so cell A1 and B1. if your name was really, really, really long, you may have to go C and D even. So however many cells that you need to do along is fine. If you screwed up and didn't grab enough, it's best just to click away, as it's called, which means just click on a different cell somewhere else. It unselects whatever you had done, and we go back and try again. So a white cross over cell A1, hold the left mouse button down, pull across as far as you need to go, and let go when they're both or they're all selected. Okay, last step, we hit the button Merge and Center. Right over here, remember? One click, and done. So Merge and Center, of course, now it glues it together. So we now have cells AB1 is just one big cell. It also centered my name. That's kind of the center part with Merge and Center. If you do not want it centered, and a lot of times I don't, right over here is our formatting section where we can say left align to put it back where it was. You could also right align if you wanted it closer to the right side of the page. Really, this is just, you know, finicky little things that you can do along the way. All right, so now if this label, this merged label was to be the title for what I wanted, I oftentimes like to use color. And what I will show you down the road is some of the examples that will be there for you to download along with these videos. You'll see a lot of color in the spreadsheets that I make. I do that on purpose. When we've got labels and then we have lots of numbers and equations and things, sometimes it's really hard to kind of differentiate where the row titles are or how the data is organized. So I always find that color helps a lot with that. So how do I add a little splash of color in here to make things a bit easier to see? Well, there's two ways. The first one is this letter A with a red line underneath. Now the little line underneath, don't worry if you have a different color. It might have been somebody has already used the computer and has changed the font color, so it might not always be red. So the letter with a color line underneath. This will actually change the font color. Now I don't encourage that because the font writing is very small to begin with in here. So for example, in this case, it would change the writing to red. Red letters on a white background are extremely hard to see. So when I talk about using color in Excel, that's not really what I mean. What I mean is the paint bucket next to it. This is called fill color. So you can see where I am here on the screen. Fill color. And there's a small little arrow next to it. So I'm going to click that pop open arrow. And here you've got some color choices. The purpose of the color choices is it actually dumps color behind the writing. So the cell becomes that color. Maybe the best way to think about that is when you take the cap off your highlighter and you slide it across a line of text on a piece of paper. It's not changing the text color, it's putting a nice big yellow or pink or blue box behind. So this is like highlighters. And much like highlighting, we want to choose very bright or very pale colors. Clearly dark grays and blacks, those are not going to work for what we want. Unless you wanted to hide something, I guess you could black it out. So very pale kind of colors. So if I choose one in here that I like, I could choose our standard kind of colors across the bottom. There's more than adequate amounts of color there. If you're really, really picky, I guess, you could go to more color at the bottom, and then you can kind of get carried away because now we're looking at a 16 million color possible blend in here. That's really excessive. So I'll choose just a kind of a light yellowy here. I click OK, and there you go. I have a yellow highlighting over top. So as I mentioned earlier, these types of formattings, whether it's the Merge and Center or now the yellow font, that doesn't just delete when we press the delete button. So go ahead, try. We're still selected on cell 81, so I press delete, and of course my name will disappear because that is text, that is stuff that can be edited. But it's still yellow and it's still merged together. So these are the remnant types of things that I said earlier, be careful. If we're practicing like this, no problem. Click all over the spreadsheet, make changes, play around, have some fun learning. But when we want to build something good, we got to go a different route. We have to bring a new page up just so none of these leftover parts will affect us. Proper way to get rid of the yellow? Well, the little arrow again, give it a click next to the paint bucket, and it says no fill. Now on my Mac, the no fill is at the top above the colors. And if I remember correctly, on a Windows-based computer, it's below, it's down at the kind of the bottom part of the screen. Either way, it'll be in this area. Do not dump white paint because it literally is white out. So that's going to put a layer of white in there. It's not going to just get rid of the yellow. So that's not a good idea either. So We click no fill and it's gone. The last piece, we're still merged. We still have two cells that are stuck together. So I have to go over here, right where it says merge and center, click the little drop down and say unmerge. And we're back to where we started. Okay, so there is the basics of how to enter in labels. What would a normal spreadsheet look like? And we're going to make a bunch of these as we go through the video tutorials, so don't worry. But usually we would highlight a strip across the top like this, maybe just the top row. We would merge that and it would say Brad's financials for 2020, 2021, like your business kind of title or something like that. Or Mary's Preserves invoice, whatever your title would be. You'd have a merged row across like that. You could put a larger font or you could put the coloring like we just looked at. After that, you would then have a row 2 label would be maybe item, date, quantity, total with taxes. There's so many times that you would use labels. Okay, so practice with a little bit of that. As I said, there's some extra little options like adding some color in just to give some shape and definition that are always very helpful. So the next piece that I want to take a look at with you is, because labels are done so commonly in Excel and so often, there's some really neat things that they've designed in here to try to help speed things up for you. So they're called autofill and autocomplete features. And these are great. As you can imagine, the amount of time that you'd be spending typing and editing and typing and adding and typing and typing and typing, any chance you can make things move faster for you, the better it would be. So if you still have your stuff in the top here in cell AB1 or in that corner, that's okay. It doesn't really matter. You can click anywhere in your spreadsheet and do a few of these examples with me. Okay, so the first one we're going to take a look at is months of the year. As you could imagine, monthly billing reports, year-end financial statements and reports, typing in months of the year are very, very common and of course quite tedious. So let's go ahead and enter in January. You got to make sure you spell these correctly, otherwise the process isn't going to work for you. As we enter in a label, we type it in. Of course, we still have the flashing I-beam at the end of the line, and we have to press enter to set that label in and put it down. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter. Excel automatically slides us down a line. Now, for many people, they'll now type in February, enter, March, enter, April, enter, and on and on and on. You don't have to do that. Excel is pre-programmed in ways to make this much faster for you. So I'm going to click back over top of January, one left click. Okay, that's just to select the cell. And then if you look in the bottom right-hand corner of that cell, there's a small square. And this small square allows us to drag and fill. Now we're going to talk about a couple more mouse pointers again. So in that bottom corner, if I slide my mouse carefully over top, and there it is, I get what's called the solid black cross. Now here's some parts that are going to be in the accompanying PDF file. So there'll be a file of rules and features for you to download and keep for yourself as well, along with the videos. And the mouse pointers are one to be very careful about. So as I said earlier, when we're moving around, we see multiple different types of mouse cursors. The solid black cross is what we call this one. And there are no pointed arrowheads or anything. It's just a solid black cross. If you're off even slightly, and this takes a bit of feel, so you'll have to practice. If you're off slightly, you're either going to get a hand symbol on a Mac, or you're going to get a four-headed black arrow on a Windows computer. That's a bad one. That drags and moves and cuts and pastes and does all kinds of bad things. It's one that I can honestly say after years of this that I've never used or found great use for. So careful, careful, get the solid black cross. This one is used all the time. So just be aware that you can make a mistake, or you probably will as a beginning user. It's okay. If you confuse the two, just delete it, start over. So with the solid black cross chosen, I'm going to hold down the left mouse button and I'm going to pull down with my mouse. And you can see this is called ghosting, is along the side. It's going to give me the months of the year. So I still have the mouse button held down, right? As I pull, look at that, September, October, November, December. When you have a full year, let go. Now I did that kind of slow and slid all over the place, but as you get up to speed and whatnot, this is phenomenal. You type in January, you press enter, you click once on it, you grab the corner, you drag, let go. And within a second, you have automatically put in all the months for the year. You need more than 1 year, just keep dragging. You can get 2, 3, 4, 5 years over and over again. No problem at all. So this is an autofill feature. We're going to practice a handful of these ones. Okay, so if that was all the labels that I needed to start off my spreadsheet, then I would click next to it in column D, for example, over here, and away I go. Column D, I could start entering in my data and we'd be well on our way. Notice that as these months of the year went in, that none of them actually fully filled out the entire width of the column. If you need more space on your screen because we're running out of room and you've got all these columns and all this data, there are ways you can condense things down. So if you remember how we started in the top corner with cell A1 and our name that was too big, we can actually do the same type of an option here, but because the cell row could shrink in to conserve space, it'll actually work that way too. So here's what I mean. Let's go up here between the two columns to get that mouse shape again. So again, this will vary depending on what column you're on. If you came and typed the stuff in column C like I did, then you're going to be between C and D. If you're on a different column, it's okay. Don't worry, just put your mouse between the two. And when you have that mouse shape, we're going to double left click, click, click. And you see it shrunk in. Now it didn't shrink in very much because September is quite long. So all it did was it auto adjusted the column width to best fit the data, or in this case, labels that are within that column. Okay, and then off we will go. So let's practice a few more of these auto-complete features, and then I'm going to send you guys on your way to practice. So not only does it work for full months of the year, but also partials. So let's go one column over like where I am, and we're going to go Jan for Jan. Again, press enter once you're done typing. Now we take our mouse and click once on the word. Grab it by the small box in the bottom right-hand corner of that cell. We need the solid black cross. Hold down the left mouse button. Pull, 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 all the way down until our little ghosted piece says December, or in this case, DEC. Let go. And there's your short form months for the year. Okay, hopefully that worked for you. Last step, I'm going to go up between columns D and E, carefully on that line. And I'm going to double left click, and it'll shrink it in. And there you see a great example of how tightly it can condense in when we have short form pieces. So this autocomplete works for a handful of other ones. I'm going to give you a few more examples and then send you on your way to practice. So let's go to the next column over, and I'm going to type in Sunday because it does work for days of the week. So I will not do that full activity with you. I'm going to leave that as a practice one for you to try on your own and see if you can remember. If you don't remember, that's okay. Rewind the video slightly, go back to where I did the first two and practice those. One column over again, we're going to type in capital S, then UN. It does work for short forms for names of the week as well. By the way, if you choose to have a work week of just Monday to Friday and not have the weekend days, it does that also. So that's okay. You can do those too. So you can go ahead and practice those two. You can pause the video and do that now. Okay. The last piece that I wanted to teach you today with our labels and entering labels in is also numbers. Now, numbers aren't always considered labels, but there are times where they will be. So you may have a list over here of numbers 1 to 50, for example. Maybe that's a list of people coming to your wedding. Like, there's so many reasons why you may use numbers as labels. So there are ways that we can use the autocomplete to help us out with this as well. Now, what you need to have, though, is a little bit different than the word labels. Number labels need 3 numbers first. Then we have to select all 3 of the numbers. Then we can drag and autocomplete them down. What do I mean? Well, here we go. In my next column, I'm going to press number 1, enter, 2, enter, 3, enter. We need 3. Okay, now, remember earlier in the video, I talked about remnants of cell formatting and how that can cause us trouble later. Look at this. This was an area in here where I did the merging. Suddenly I have alignment problems. G is right aligned on row 2, but yet row 3 and 4 have centered. That's leftovers from when we were playing around earlier. So here we go. Not that this would cause us any trouble, other than it just looks bad. So let me go ahead and fix that problem. So I'm going to use the white cross, and I'm going to go on the cell above. So we're going to choose cell G2. White cross, hold the left mouse button down, pull, pull, and I'll grab a few more because I can't remember how large my merge was there. I'll let go, and then I'm going to go over here to our alignment section, and I'm going to choose right align. And there we go. Okay, so now I'm just going to click the side to unselect it all, and we're back to go where we were. So for creating lists or creating autocompletes with numbers, what we have to do is type in 3 because it needs to see the pattern. So 1 to 2 and then 2 to 3 gives the spreadsheet actually 2 spots to look at what the pattern is between them. In this case, we're just counting up by ones. It's quite simple. So how do I now autocomplete this down? White cross on our first cell that has the data. So in this case, G2. Hold the mouse button down, left button, pull, pull to highlight all 3 numbers. Let go of the mouse button. Carefully move your mouse to the bottom right-hand corner. Make sure you don't tap or click accidentally because you'll lose your selection. We need the solid black cross. Hold the left mouse button down and pull, 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 pull as far as you want to go, and then let go. And it will auto-complete the numbers down for you. Okay, if that didn't work for you, pause, back up the video a little bit, go through the steps again and practice it a few more times. Okay, so the last things that I'm going to give you to practice and do here for a little bit of homework is I'm going to give you a couple more patterns here. Column H, we're going to go up by odd numbers. So it's the same idea. 1, enter, 3, enter, 5, enter. You can count by 5s, by 10s, by 100s, by whatever pattern that you want. Even decimals, you could go 0, then 1.5, then 3, and it'll know to go up by 1.5 each time. Next column over, I'm going to go 2, enter 4, enter 6, enter. And there's 2 now for you to go back, practice selecting and auto-completing those ones down. I would recommend you even delete the data out of the other rows, just leave the January and Jan and just the 1, 2, 3. Go back and practice these several times so you become comfortable with creating labels. What we've done so far is take a look at a generic overview of just some of the major features that we're going to be practicing with throughout these tutorials in video 1. Video 2 now is creating the labels, adding a splash of color, giving some shape and design to our spreadsheet. And then of course, as we move into the next videos, we're going to get into the data entry and the math and what to do with some of the other things that we can create, like charts and conditional formatting and some of the more advanced stuff as we go along. So please go back and practice some of these features out before you head into the next video, and we'll see you again. Thanks for watching.